Raymond Loewy's design career was not confined by boundaries. It unfolded across decades and industries, reshaping the very definition of beauty in motion and function. By the time most Americans had only begun to recognize design as an art form worthy of attention, Loewy had already left fingerprints on everything from locomotives to lipsticks. His work reached the pages of Vogue and Harper's Bazaar in the late 1910s, where his fashion illustrations captured a sense of modernity and grace that hinted at his future path. Even then, Loewy's eye sought not only to decorate but to streamline, to remove the unnecessary, to refine form until it became purpose. What began with the flowing lines of a gown would soon translate into the steel contours of industry, and perhaps nowhere was that transformation more apparent than in his long association with Studebaker. By 1934, Loewy's name had become synonymous with American modernism. That was the year he designed the Cold Spot refrigerator for Sears Roebuck and Company, a household appliance that would become both a commercial triumph and a cultural milestone. Its sleek, unbroken lines and sense of cleanliness made it look more like sculpture than utility. The Cold Spot was more than just a refrigerator. It was a quiet revolution in how Americans perceived everyday objects. It embodied a belief that even the most ordinary tools of life deserved beauty, that design could humanize technology. Clients soon lined up to capture a bit of that magic. The Pennsylvania Railroad hired him to reimagine their locomotives. Lucky Strike brought him in to modernize its cigarette packaging. Greyhound entrusted him with the image of its iconic bus fleet. Each project carried the Loewy signature, a blend of elegance, simplicity, and motion. But for car enthusiasts, his most enduring impact was the one forged with Studebaker, the South Bend automaker that dared to imagine design as its soul. Our subject here, the 1940 Studebaker Commander Club Sedan, comes from the early phase of that relationship, a time when Studebaker was ready to redefine its image and when Loewy's influence was beginning to reshape what an automobile could be. It's a car that embodies a particular chapter in American history, when optimism was tempered by the realities of the late Depression years, but the promise of a new decade shimmered just ahead. The Commander was positioned neatly between the modest champion and the stately president, and it carried a sense of middle-class aspiration. But in design, it reached for something much grander. The very surfaces of its body were composed with a sculptor's precision, soft, confident curves that suggested both grace and authority. Studebaker, long before most manufacturers spoke about the artistry of design, knew exactly what it had in Raymond Loewy. The company proudly acknowledged his touch in its brochures, celebrating the integration of sealed beam headlights into the front fenders, a feature that gave the car a unified, aerodynamic look. They spoke of the door handles that flowed into the beltline trim as if they had grown there organically, and the studied simplicity of the front grille that avoided ostentation in favor of quiet sophistication. Chrome-plated bumpers added punctuation to the overall composition, catching the light just enough to underline the car's geometry without shouting for attention. On the second page of the 1940 Commander and President brochure, Studebaker called this harmony of forms a symphony of harmonious design, a phrase that today feels poetic but, at the time, represented the company's deliberate recognition of the new industrial art movement that Loewy had helped to popularize. That philosophy is visible in the 1940 Commander Club Sedan that now resides in Fullerton, California, offered for sale by a dealership specializing in American classics. It's a piece of history, yet also a tangible artifact of design evolution, a rolling sculpture that captures the intersection of form, function, and emotion. Originally finished in clipper gray, this particular example now wears a factory-correct shade of Colleen Green Light, a hue that flatters the car's contours and seems to change character under shifting light. In bright sun, it takes on a luminous pastel quality, reflecting the optimism of pre-war America. Under softer skies, it deepens into something more contemplative, a tone that feels at once nostalgic and alive. Open the door and the cabin greets you with the charm of another era. The selling dealer reports that the light gray cloth upholstery is original, an astonishing survival given that it has endured 85 years of time and touch. There are creases here and there, the gentle patina of authenticity, but the seats remain intact, proof that durability and craftsmanship once mattered more than planned obsolescence. The door panels and window surrounds, however, have been renewed, echoing the original patterns but fresh in texture. The steering wheel's rim, finished in a woodlook plastic, catches the eye with its warm tone, coordinating beautifully with the refurbished dashboard and fascia. The result is a balance between preservation and renewal, a space where history feels lived in rather than entombed. Slip behind the wheel and you begin to understand the logic of Loewy's approach. The instrumentation is simple, symmetrical, and human-scaled. The switchgear feels deliberate, the shapes intuitive. Even before ergonomics became a buzzword, Loewy understood that beauty and usability were not enemies. His guiding principle, most advanced yet acceptable, meant that progress must always be grounded in familiarity. He knew that radical design could alienate as easily as it could inspire. In the Commander, he struck that delicate balance. Modern but not alien, elegant yet approachable. It was the design equivalent of a reassuring handshake. Mechanically, the 1940 Commander relied on Studebaker's 226 cubic inch inline-six, an engine that delivered 90 horsepower, modest by today's standards but entirely respectable in its time. Its power delivery was smooth, the torque curve generous, and the engineering robust. The car could climb hills confidently and cruise comfortably on the open road. According to the dealer's video demonstration, the Commander really picks up nicely and takes hills easily through the gears of its 3-speed manual transmission with overdrive. There's something deeply satisfying about the rhythm of that mechanical dance. Clutch, lever, throttle, the pure, analog connection between driver and machine. Studebaker's engineers tuned the suspension for a supple ride, and while body roll was inevitable in a car of this stature, it lent a sense of dignity to motion. New drum brakes have been fitted for safety, a necessary precaution for anyone planning to explore the same winding hills that the dealer's representative described. Driving a car like this today is a reminder of how different the road once felt. The steering is unassisted but communicative. You feel every nuance of the surface beneath you. The cabin is filled not with digital silence but with the faint hum of the straight six, the whisper of wind slipping past the fenders, and the soft mechanical ticking of a machine at work. There's no pretense, no artifice, only the sound of honest engineering. At a time when modern cars surround drivers with layers of insulation, the Commander offers transparency. It invites you to participate, to sense, to listen. The result is not just transportation but an experience, one that bridges 8 decades of history with the turn of a key. Yet beyond the mechanics lies the story of design, of how Raymond Loewy and his team at Studebaker transformed the automobile from mere utility into cultural statement. Before Loewy's arrival, most car design in America was dictated by engineers and manufacturing constraints. Bodies were assembled from practical shapes that prioritized function over form. Loewy introduced a new vocabulary: streamlining, proportion, rhythm. He insisted that the automobile should look as though it were moving even when standing still. Under his influence, Studebaker's cars began to embody a certain grace that set them apart from their competitors. The Commander's long, tapering hood, the gentle sweep of its roofline, the clean termination of its rear fenders, these were not random decisions. They were part of a philosophy that believed beauty and efficiency could coexist. That belief would reach its full expression in the post-war years, when Loewy and his studio created some of the most striking designs in Studebaker history: the 1947 Champion and Commander with their low-slung silhouettes, the 1953 Starliner Coupe that many still consider one of the most beautiful American cars ever built, and even later projects like the 1963 Avanti, a fiberglass-bodied masterpiece that looked a decade ahead of its time. But the seeds of all that innovation were planted in cars like the 1940 Commander. Here, one can trace the early steps of a design language that would come to define not only Studebaker but an entire era of industrial art. It's worth remembering that in 1940, the world stood on the brink of profound change. Europe was already engulfed in war, and America, though not yet directly involved, was feeling the tremors. The automobile industry, still recovering from the Great Depression, was once again pivoting toward wartime production. The Commander thus represents a fleeting moment of peace and progress, the calm before the storm. Its design, with its optimistic curves and polished surfaces, captures the spirit of a society eager to move forward. In the years that followed, factories would be repurposed for tanks and aircraft, and the civilian automobile would temporarily disappear. But when production resumed after the war, designers and engineers would look back at pre-war cars like this and see the blueprint for what modern motoring could be. That's part of what makes the 1940 Commander so compelling today. It's not merely an antique. It's a conversation between eras. Each curve speaks of craftsmanship, each detail of intention. To stand beside it is to imagine the world of its first owner, perhaps a businessman in a tailored suit, proud to park this modern marvel in his driveway. It's to picture the gas station attendants admiring its chrome reflections, or the Sunday drives along quiet two-lane highways where the car's 6 cylinders hummed contentedly at 45 miles per hour. Cars like this were not disposable. They were built to be companions, to share life's journeys, to endure. And endure it has. The survival of any pre-war automobile in this condition is remarkable, but the preservation of its original interior materials makes this particular Commander a rare find. It bears the marks of age gracefully, like a well-worn leather jacket that only improves with time. Every fiber, every seam tells a story. The renewed elements, the door panels, the steering wheel, the dashboard, have been restored with respect for authenticity, avoiding the over-restoration that too often sterilizes the past. Instead, this car feels honest, its history intact. For collectors, that authenticity carries value beyond dollars. It connects them to a lineage, to the era when American design first discovered modernity. Owning a 1940 Studebaker Commander is not just about driving. It's about curating a piece of design history. It represents the moment when the automobile became an art form, when industrial design became a bridge between technology and taste. For those who appreciate Loewy's philosophy, this car is a tangible embodiment of his ideals. Raymond Loewy once said, "To sell something, make it beautiful." He understood that beauty is not superficial but essential, that design could elevate the ordinary to the extraordinary. The Commander embodies that belief. Even parked quietly in a garage, its lines continue to speak. They speak of optimism, of progress, of a time when America defined itself not by imitation but by innovation. In an age dominated by sleek sameness and algorithmic design, this 85-year-old sedan stands as a reminder of individuality, of the human touch behind every curve. Offered today at $16,995, it seems almost absurdly accessible for what it represents. That some could scarcely buy a set of wheels on a new luxury car, yet here it grants access to a movable work of art. A car whose value is measured not in performance figures or technology but in presence. It is, in a sense, a museum piece that still wants to move, to breathe, to live. The temptation is strong to preserve it forever behind glass, but perhaps the greatest tribute to its creators would be to drive it as they intended, to feel the play of light on its fenders, the rhythm of its mechanical heart, the way it seems to glide through time itself. If you've ever wondered what it felt like to inhabit the optimism of pre-war America, this car offers a glimpse. It carries with it the scent of gasoline mixed with ambition, the echo of a jazz record playing in the background, the hum of a country on the cusp of transformation. Its design language speaks fluently across generations, to those who see cars not as status symbols but as cultural artifacts, expressions of art and identity. To drive it is to participate in that dialogue, to become, if only for a moment, part of the continuum that began when Raymond Loewy picked up his pencil and drew the future. There's something poetic about how time has treated this machine. While the world has changed beyond recognition, the Commander remains what it always was. Graceful, resolute, quietly confident. It has outlasted the company that built it, the factories that assembled it, and even the designer who gave it form. Yet its essence endures, the essence of good design, of purpose refined by imagination. In that sense, it's more than just a car. It's an idea made tangible. And ideas, when rendered beautifully, never truly age. The 1940 Studebaker Commander Club Sedan is a reminder that progress need not sacrifice charm, that innovation can coexist with soul. It invites us to reconsider what we value in a world obsessed with speed and novelty. It reminds us that sometimes the truest form of modernity is restraint, the confidence to do just enough and no more. That was Loewy's genius. He knew when to stop. He knew that elegance is not the addition of ornament but the elimination of excess. So perhaps the real story of this car is not about horsepower or rarity or even price. It's about continuity, about how design, when done right, transcends its moment. Raymond Loewy's influence can still be felt today, in everything from the curve of an airplane wing to the logo on a coffee cup. But it's in cars like this Commander where his spirit feels most alive. Here, in the sweep of the fenders and the simplicity of the grille, one can see the birth of American industrial art, not as an abstraction, but as something you can touch, hear, and drive. And that may be the most beautiful thing of all.